My name is Claire Donovan. I'm 37 years old, and for most of my life, I believed that love could overcome any obstacle. I met Daniel at a coffee shop in San Diego 6 years ago, where his easy smile and engaging stories about his family's maritime business drew me in instantly. His parents, Richard and Eleanor, had built Blue Horizon Shipping from the ground up, and Daniel was clearly being groomed to take over someday. When we married, I thought I was becoming part of a family that valued loyalty and commitment. I couldn't have been more wrong. Our struggles with fertility began almost immediately after the wedding. Month after month, the pregnancy tests came back negative. At first, Daniel was supportive, holding my hand during doctor visits, reassuring me that it would happen when the time was right. But as the months turned into years, his family's patience wore thin. Eleanor began making pointed remarks about my duties as a wife, and Richard would grumble about needing grandchildren to carry on the family name. The breaking point came 3 weeks ago, during Sunday dinner at their sprawling oceanfront estate. I had just finished helping Eleanor serve dessert when she announced loudly, "Maybe it's time Daniel considered other options. There are plenty of younger women who could give our family what it needs." Daniel said nothing. He simply stared at his plate while his father nodded in agreement. That night, I knew something fundamental had shifted between us. This morning was the final blow. Eleanor summoned me into the living room, where Daniel and Richard were already seated. Her expression was cold and resolute. "Claire, we've been more than patient with you," she began, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "But facts are facts. You can't give us grandchildren, and this family needs to move forward." Daniel spoke at last, but not to defend me. "Mom's right," he said quietly, avoiding my gaze. "We can't keep pretending this marriage is working." The betrayal was sharper than any physical wound. The man I had loved and supported through everything was choosing his parents' approval over our vows. As I stood there absorbing their rejection, I caught sight of myself in the hallway mirror, smaller somehow, diminished by years of disappointment. Yet in my eyes was something unexpected, a flicker of determination. They had no idea that this moment would mark the start of my transformation, not my destruction. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Phoenix, where I learned early that love demanded effort and sacrifice. My parents, both school teachers, showed me what real partnership looked like. When my father was diagnosed with cancer during my senior year of college, my mother never wavered, working 2 jobs to cover treatment costs while still spending every evening at his bedside. Their love story ended when he passed away 2 years after my wedding, but their example shaped my understanding of commitment. I met Daniel during a particularly difficult chapter in my life. I had just begun working as a marketing coordinator for a nonprofit, trying to rebuild my confidence after a string of failed relationships. Daniel seemed different, ambitious, yet kind, successful, yet down to earth. His eyes lit up when he spoke about his family's business, painting vivid pictures of a future where we'd travel the world, raise our children to sail on the family yacht, and build everything on a foundation of love. Our early years together were genuinely happy. Daniel was attentive, surprising me with weekend getaways and little gestures that showed I was always on his mind. His parents appeared warm and welcoming. Eleanor invited me to luncheons and asked for my opinion on family matters, while Richard entertained me with stories of growing Blue Horizon from a single tugboat to a fleet of cargo ships. I thought I had found the family I'd always wanted. The first cracks appeared in our second year of marriage when I still wasn't pregnant. Eleanor's questions became sharper, more invasive. "Are you tracking your cycles properly?" she'd ask over dinner. "Have you considered a specialist? Time isn't on your side." Daniel would squeeze my hand under the table, but he never asked her to stop. Looking back, I realize now That was when he began prioritizing their comfort over mine. Desperate to save our marriage, I threw myself into fertility treatments, enduring hormone injections that left me weeping over commercials, invasive procedures that stripped away my dignity, and endless appointments that consumed my days. Daniel attended the first few consultations, but soon found excuses to skip them. Work became his escape, and I navigated the medical maze alone. The emotional distance widened with every negative test. Daniel started working late, traveling more often, and speaking to me in the polite, distant tone he used with business associates. His parents' criticism intensified, questioning my diet, my stress levels, my dedication. They treated me less like a family member and more like a failing employee, and Daniel allowed it. Standing in their immaculate living room, with panoramic views of the ocean, I finally understood. My worth to them had always been conditional. I was valued for what I could produce, not for who I was. It was a devastating realization, but also strangely freeing. If they thought I was nothing, maybe it was time to become nothing to them. The packing happened faster than I thought possible. Eleanor oversaw the process like a supervisor, while Richard and Daniel lingered in the doorway as if I might slip a family heirloom into my bag. Everything I had accumulated over 5 years of marriage fit into 2 duffel bags: clothes, a few books, photographs, and the jewelry my grandmother had left me. The expensive gifts from Daniel no longer felt like mine. The diamond earrings from our first anniversary, the pearl necklace from our wedding day, the designer handbags from his business trips all belonged to the version of me who still believed in their love. "You can take the Honda," Daniel said quietly, holding out the keys to my old car. It was a 2018 model with over 100,000 miles. Hardly generous, considering the luxury vehicles parked in their garage. Eleanor sniffed as though even that was too much. "She should be grateful we're not asking for the ring back," she muttered, ignoring the fact that I had already returned it during our argument. As I loaded my bags into the trunk, I noticed neighbors peeking from behind their pristine hedges, pretending not to watch. The humiliation was complete. Claire Donovan, the woman who couldn't give her husband children, being cast out of paradise. I wondered how Eleanor would explain my sudden absence to her bridge club. What story Daniel would tell his business associates about his missing wife. Driving away from their estate felt like escaping a gilded prison. I forced myself not to glance back at the house where I'd spent years trying to prove my worth. My hands shook on the steering wheel, and twice I had to pull over just to breathe. The truth was crushing. I was 37, unemployed, essentially homeless. My savings were modest, my job prospects uncertain, my confidence shattered. Yet, somewhere between tears and panic, something unexpected emerged. A strange sense of relief. For the first time in years, no one was tracking my cycles, dissecting my diet, or scheduling my life around fertility treatments. I was free from their constant judgment and suffocating expectations. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I landed on a familiar name, Monica, my college friend in Los Angeles. She had always said I could stay with her any time. I hesitated only a moment before pressing her number, ready to admit my marriage had collapsed, and I needed help starting over. As the sun set over the Pacific, painting the sky in brilliant orange and purple, I made a silent promise to myself. I would rebuild my life stronger than before. Monica's apartment in West Hollywood was a far cry from the oceanfront mansion I had just left behind, but the warmth in her embrace at the door was worth more than all of Eleanor's cold hospitality. "Oh, honey," she murmured, holding me as I finally broke down. "Tell me everything." Over wine and take-out pizza, I spilled it all: the endless fertility struggles, the cruel remarks from Daniel's family, the humiliating dismissal. Monica listened without judgment, refilling my glass and squeezing my hand when I faltered. "You know what?" she said when I finished. "This might be the best thing that's ever happened to you. I know it doesn't feel like it now, but that family was toxic, Claire. You deserve so much better." Monica had always been perceptive. Back in college, she'd warned me about boyfriends who later proved unworthy. Now, as a successful talent agent, her instincts about people were sharper than ever. The next few weeks blurred into a routine of job applications, apartment hunting, and trying to rediscover who I was without the title of Daniel's wife. Monica insisted I stay as long as I needed, but I didn't want to impose. Eventually, I found a small studio in Silver Lake and secured a position with a marketing firm specializing in nonprofits. The salary was modest, but for the first time in years, I was valued for my skills, not my ability to bear children. 3 months after leaving San Diego, everything changed. I had been feeling unusually tired and nauseous, chalking it up to stress and my new schedule. Out of habit more than hope, I bought a pregnancy test. The positive result left me staring at the stick in disbelief. After 5 years of trying, after countless medical interventions, and the collapse of my marriage, I was finally pregnant. The irony was staggering. The child Daniel and his family had so desperately wanted was growing inside me, and they would never know. Part of me wanted to call him immediately, to throw this miracle in their faces. But the stronger part of me recognized it for what it was, an opportunity. This baby would be mine alone, free from their toxic expectations and conditional love. I scheduled an appointment with an obstetrician and began navigating the strange, surreal process of pregnancy on my own. The doctor was kind but matter-of-fact, asking about the father's medical history and whether he would be involved in the child's life. "No," I said firmly. "He won't be involved." I didn't elaborate and she didn't press. This was my choice, my child, my future. As the weeks passed, I poured myself into creating a life built on values I knew truly mattered: unconditional love, emotional safety, and the freedom to become exactly who they were meant to be. I devoured parenting books, researched child development, and began setting aside money for a college fund. Monica helped me transform a corner of my tiny studio into a nursery, painting the walls a soft yellow since I decided to wait until birth to learn the baby's gender. The pregnancy wasn't easy. Morning sickness lingered into the second trimester, and the weight of raising a child alone often felt overwhelming. But every time doubt crept in, I reminded myself of the alternative: bringing a baby into an environment where love came with strings attached. By my 6th month, I'd stopped fearing the future and started picturing it vividly. This child would know that their worth had nothing to do with what they could produce or achieve. They would grow up with the kind of love my parents had shown each other, the kind I had always wanted to give. One rainy Tuesday in March, my son, Lucas Andrew Donovan, was born. The moment I held him, I finally understood what unconditional love truly meant. He was perfect healthy, alert, and absolutely mine. The nurses commented on his striking green eyes and thick dark hair, features that unmistakably came from Daniel. For a brief moment, a pang of sadness hit me. His father would never know this extraordinary little person. But it passed quickly. This was better. Lucas would never have to earn love or prove his worth to anyone. Monica stood beside me as my birth partner, holding my hand through contractions and crying nearly as hard as I did when Lucas arrived. "He's beautiful," she whispered, snapping photos while I counted his tiny fingers and toes. The first months of motherhood were exhausting, but they were also the most deeply fulfilling of my life. I took maternity leave from the marketing firm, and Monica's flexible schedule allowed her to step in whenever she wasn't traveling for work. We quickly found a rhythm. While Lucas napped, I worked part-time from home and when Monica was in town, she would take over evening feedings so I could rest. It wasn't the traditional family I had once imagined, but it was filled with more love and support than I had ever experienced with Daniel's family. During those early months, an idea that had been simmering in my mind since leaving San Diego began to take shape. The fertility industry was worth billions, built in part on the desperation of women like me, women made to believe their value depended entirely on their ability to conceive. At first, I wrote about my experiences as a form of therapy. The invasive procedures, the emotional manipulation, the way society quietly punishes women who struggle to have children. But the more I wrote, the more I realized my story was not unique. I began reaching out to other women, collecting their stories, and weaving them together into a larger narrative about the crushing pressure to procreate and how it can erode self-worth and destroy relationships. Some of these women eventually conceived, others chose adoption, and still others found happiness living child-free. But all of them had been made to feel inadequate by people and systems that reduced them to their reproductive function. What began as journal entries evolved into a full manuscript. Lucas would play on the floor beside my desk as I wrote late into the night. Eventually, I sent a book proposal to several literary agents. To my astonishment, 3 wanted to represent me. Within weeks of signing with the one I trusted most, publishers were bidding on my memoir. The advance was enough to give Lucas and me financial security, but more importantly, it confirmed that our story mattered. As I signed the publishing contract, I thought of Daniel and his parents. They had discarded me like damaged goods, never imagining that their cruelty would become the catalyst for something powerful and profitable. They had no idea that the grandchild they once demanded was thriving without them, surrounded by people who loved him simply for existing. Lucas was 15 months old when my book was scheduled for release. By then, he was toddling around, babbling constantly and charming everyone he met. Monica had become his honorary aunt, and my circle of friends had grown to include other writers, single mothers, and women who understood the kind of resilience born from shared struggle. We had built something beautiful from the ashes of my marriage. When Invisible Worth. A Woman's Journey. Beyond Fertility debuted, it exceeded everyone's expectations, landing at number 7 on the New York Times bestseller list. The book sparked conversations on social media, in book clubs, and in living rooms across the country. I was invited onto morning shows, podcasts, and panel discussions about women's health and societal expectations. Women from all walks of life reached out, sharing their own stories of being reduced to their reproductive capacity. What surprised me most was the response from men husbands, thanking me for helping them understand their wives' struggles. Fathers apologizing to their daughters for years of pressure. Even fertility doctors who wanted to discuss ways to support women emotionally as well as medically. Lucas accompanied me to some of the events, charming audiences with his green eyes and easy smile while I spoke about rebuilding life after betrayal. People often remarked on how happy and secure he seemed. I knew it was because he had never been made to feel his worth depended on meeting someone else's expectations. It was during a book signing in San Francisco that I met David Whitmore, an investment banker who had attended my talk on financial independence after divorce. Recently divorced himself, he had a 7-year-old daughter named Sophie. Our first conversation over coffee stretched into dinner, then weekend visits when Sophie was with him. David was everything Daniel hadn't been emotionally available, genuinely interested in my thoughts and dreams, and wonderful with Lucas. The relationship developed slowly and naturally. David never tried to replace Lucas's absent father. Instead, he became a steady presence, offering space for all of us to grow together. Sophie adored Lucas, like the little brother she had always wanted, and Lucas adored her right back. A year into our relationship, David proposed, not just to me, but to our little family. Kneeling in front of both children, he asked, "Will you marry me? And will you two be my kids?" Sophie and Lucas shouted, "Yes!" before I could answer, but my tears had already given me away. By the time David and I began planning our wedding, my second book was already in development, a guide for single mothers navigating both entrepreneurship and dating. The success of Invisible Worth had opened doors I'd never imagined. Invitations to speak at conferences, universities, and corporate events about resilience and reinvention. A production company had even optioned the film rights to my memoir, and I was consulting on the screenplay. Lucas was 3 when we decided on a small beach ceremony in Malibu. Only our closest friends and chosen family would be there. Monica was my maid of honor, Sophie was our flower girl, and Lucas beaming with pride served as ring bearer. As I stood barefoot on the sand, listening to David promise to love and protect all of us, I thought about how far I'd come from that crushing day in Eleanor's living room. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was marrying into another successful family. But this time, everything was different. David's parents welcomed Lucas and me without hesitation. They didn't care about his biological father or my fertility history. What mattered to them was kindness, character, and the happiness of their son. It was everything I had once hoped to find with Daniel's family back, when I still believed love had to be earned through perfection. Now I knew better. Every so often, I'd wonder where Daniel was, whether he ever thought about the wife he'd discarded so carelessly. But those thoughts were fleeting, replaced by gratitude for the life I was building and the unexpected gifts that had grown out of my darkest chapter. So when David suggested hosting his firm's celebration party on a friend's luxury yacht moored in San Diego Harbor, I hesitated, but only briefly. I wasn't the broken woman who had driven away from this city years ago. I was a best-selling author, a confident mother, and the partner of a man who loved me for exactly who I was. We arrived on a perfect June afternoon. Lucas, now fascinated by boats, clutched David's hand and pointed at the massive yachts bobbing in their slips. Sophie chattered beside me about a summer camp book she was reading. We looked exactly like what we were, a happy family, walking into a day of celebration. The yacht was breathtaking multiple decks, elegant furnishings, a crew serving champagne and gourmet appetizers. As I stepped aboard, pride swelled in me. Years ago, I had been exiled from a similar world of privilege. Now, I was returning on my own terms, not seeking approval, but enjoying the success I had earned. The afternoon unfolded effortlessly laughter, music, and the kind of light-hearted conversation that comes when you're surrounded by people who want you to succeed. I was mid-discussion with one of David's business partners about my upcoming book tour when I noticed movement out of the corner of my eye. A familiar yacht was pulling into a nearby slip, its distinctive blue and white hull impossible to forget. Eleanor's Pride. My breath caught. I had spent countless weekends on that yacht during my marriage. Even from a distance, I recognized Richard's silver hair, Eleanor's stiff posture, and, between them, Daniel. They were dressed for a day on the water, but their tense body language told another story. Richard was arguing with the marina staff, his face flushed with frustration. Then, as if drawn by fate, Daniel looked up toward our yacht ride as I stepped to the railing with Lucas in my arms. We were maybe 50 yards apart, but I saw the exact moment recognition hit him. His expression shifted from casual to shocked, then to something that looked uncomfortably close to fear. Eleanor followed his gaze and froze, grabbing Richard's arm to get his attention. In seconds, all three were staring at us, at me, at the child in my arms, who bore unmistakable traces of Daniel's features, and at the man beside me, who exuded quiet, protective confidence. "Mama, why are those people staring at us?" Lucas asked innocently, his small voice carrying easily over the water. Guests nearby turned to look, and David, understanding, instantly moved beside me, his hand firm against my back, while Sophie came to stand at my other side. "Just some people I used to know," I said calmly, my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. "They don't matter anymore." But across the water, I could see the rapid calculation in Eleanor's eyes. Lucas's age, his features, the timeline. She was putting the pieces together. The realization was written all over her face. Daniel took a half step forward, as if he might call out, but David's presence seemed to halt him. He was looking at someone entirely different from the woman he'd abandoned years ago. I didn't smile with malice, only with the contentment of a woman who had built a life far better than the one she'd lost. Without a word, I turned from the railing and rejoined our party, Lucas laughing in my arms, while David whispered something that made me laugh too. The psychological ripple from that brief encounter spread faster than I could have imagined. Within hours, photos from the yacht party were appearing on social media, guests posting snapshots of me with David, Lucas playing happily on deck, Sophie smiling beside us. The captions painted a clear picture. Best-selling author Claire Donovan, enjoying life with her beautiful family. It didn't take long for the images to circulate through circles that Daniel's family couldn't ignore. Their friends, colleagues, and business associates all saw them. And just as quickly, speculation began. Daniel's attempts to reach me were clumsy and desperate. He called my publisher, my agent, even Monica, leaving messages that ranged from pleading to defensive. When those failed, he showed up unannounced at one of my Los Angeles book signings. His presence caused a scene, and security escorted him out. The incident made local news, and within hours, reporters were connecting him to the ex-husband depicted in my memoir. The fallout was swift. Richard and Eleanor's shipping company began losing contracts as clients distanced themselves from the sudden wave of negative publicity. Eleanor's social standing crumbled as whispers spread through her elite social circles about the grandson she had once coldly dismissed, about the striking resemblance he bore to Daniel. The same women who had once envied her perfect family now avoided her entirely, or worse, pitied her. Richard's health declined under the stress, and the family business, once their pride, was sold to competitors for a fraction of its former value. Daniel's personal life fared no better. The young woman he had married 6 months after our divorce left him when the scandal hit, taking their infant daughter and half of his remaining assets. His story became a cautionary tale, a man who traded love for status only to lose everything. One crisp afternoon, I stood on the beach outside our new home in Carmel, watching Lucas chase waves. I thought about how they had once tried to break me, telling me I was nothing. In reality, they had freed me. The best revenge, I realized, wasn't destroying them. It was building something so beautiful that their absence no longer mattered. I stood there, the salty wind tangling my hair, watching Lucas squeal with delight as the waves lapped at his ankles. That sound, his pure, unguarded laughter, was the truest measure of my success. They had tried to define my worth by what I couldn't give them. But in losing everything I thought I wanted, I had discovered everything I actually needed. I had love, security, and a family built not by bloodline expectations, but by choice, trust, and respect. Sometimes I wondered if I should thank them for forcing me to walk away, for pushing me to rebuild, for unknowingly setting me free. Without their cruelty, I might never have found the courage to live life entirely on my own terms. Now, when people asked about my past, I no longer spoke with bitterness. The girl who once believed her value depended on others' approval was gone. In her place stood a woman who had learned that real strength is quiet, steady, and unshakable. And as I stood there on that wide, open shore with my son, I knew the truth. The best revenge wasn't in proving them wrong. It was in living so well that their absence became irrelevant. I had finally become the woman I was always meant to be, and I wasn't going back.